Hello and welcome to week 43's gameplay episode. We have an earlier gameplay episode for you this week. Josh is away, so he may be joining us for the content episode later in the week. For now, let us introduce our gameplay expertise. Joining us after a little while out, it is 𝗏𝘓𝘂. Hello, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. Took about a month off the game since the end of Team of the Season, but excited to be back and hopefully get some tips after playing Weekend League and doing some Evos and whatnot this past weekend.
Nice, yeah. You have an interesting tactics share too, so we'll get into that. But not before introducing a guest we've had a few times. Great to have him back. Creates great guides for gameplay. It's NealGuides. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me back as usual. Really enjoyed his podcast.
Yeah, it's good to have you. Let us start then. Actually, by talking about the patch we had recently, the key takeaway from that patch was that they had reduced the amount of bounce backs from tackling, and they'd also added a delay to the tackling animation or how quickly you can recover from a tackle, essentially. And that was to prevent people spamming tackle. How did you feel about this change, Hugh, since trying it?
Definitely felt like a step in the right direction. Still had the occasional bounce back, but definitely less than before. I'm curious how, if they implement this like for the future game, like if that will still be the case when we have much lower rated players. Because you think right now we have like max stats, 4 or 5 playstyle pluses. Like I feel like it's a little easier to have better tackling in these conditions, but hopefully that's something that they're able to maybe tune up a little bit more for the future when we have lower stats, and then maybe over time they can kind of gradually decrease the help.
Yeah, that's true. I know, Neal, you obviously coach people of varying abilities and hear from lots of players who I imagine may have complained about bounce backs and things. Is that something you saw? Do you think that that's improved things for them? And do you welcome this change, I suppose?
I think it's quite interesting because a lot of people, they're using they're kind of forcing their players to use Anticipate. Whereas me personally, I just don't use Anticipate Plus as much as everyone else, especially not the gold. I may use the base silver. Personally speaking, from the patch itself, I don't think I've noticed that much of a change. But then again, I only really tackle if I know it's 100% guaranteed. And if it's a 50-50 situation, but I prefer to go with a slide tackle because I feel like you just come out a bit more cleanly with the ball. So that's what I normally do. But otherwise, I think it's a good change. I think the last time we had a change this late may have been FIFA 23 in that summer update, if I'm not mistaken. But I've not seen a patch this late for quite some time, actually.
Yeah, it was a bit surprising to see it, actually, because it is something people have been asking for a while. And it felt like it would have been better if it had come a few months ago, as he says, when players were slightly less good at tackling, and so it was more impactful. But I suppose actually you've got players now with Anticipate Plus, Bruiser Plus, etc., and yet they're still not always coming away with the ball when they should. So I could see why they were like, okay, we really do need to do something about this. And yeah, personally, I've found it pretty good, and I've been surprised actually at how effective it's felt at sort of cleaning up the bounce backs, particularly. But yeah, it is quite punishing missing a tackle now. But again, that is kind of how it should be. Okay, well, let's move on to a question from Dennis. He is asking if you were to build the perfect striker and central cam. Let's start with striker. Just on play styles, what combinations would you go for? And I guess maybe what we're looking for here is like a play style ranking for the striker position in a way. So the things you prioritize, and I guess we're mainly looking at playstyle pluses at this point in the cycle, considering you can have like 5 of them. But any that you think are key for having as just regular playstyles, I guess that would be worth mentioning too. So yeah, let's start with you, Hugh. What would you be prioritizing in terms of playstyles?
I think, at least right now, my favorite is low driven plus. I mostly just shoot like inside the box with like shots that have a fairly good chance of going in. So I'm not too concerned about like the long range finesse, trivela, power shot, anything like that. So I definitely prefer low driven plus. And I think even more so than like the effectiveness of the shot, I just like how quickly you can get the shots off. Like you just tap it and they take the shot so quickly, which is good. I think if you like just get a little bit of space and you can just hit that shot nice and fast. That's really why I prefer it. It can vary, based on your tactics, if you have like a striker pair, things like that. But I've really been enjoying low driven plus just because I do a lot of like cutbacks, or you like get into the box and square it across, and you can just get that really quick, reliable shot. Whereas the other ones, even if they're really good, you still have to charge them up. You have to get the right body angle sometimes for like a finesse. That are like, if you're not in the right setup, it doesn't really matter how good the shot is, just because you have to line it up in a certain way.
Yeah, that's true. So that's your number one. Would you have a different number one, Neal, than low driven plus?
This one I would say is quite debatable. I think it really requires. I think this is the time of the year when you can actually play the game, and the benefit is you can choose a play with what play styles you want. Because most of the year you're normally restricted. If you wanted to use a play with rapid and quick step, it's almost you're never going to find that. Whereas now you can pick and choose. So I think I also agree. I think low driven is, for me, again, it's mainly about the time to take the shot away. When you get the ball quickly, you haven't got that much space to take a touch, you can get the ball away quickly. I think that's the most effective way of scoring inside the box right now. But I think also it just depends. For example, someone might like a 𝗃𝗏𝗏, but if you don't, or I know we're talking about playstyle pluses here, but let's just say, for example, the 𝗃𝗏𝗏 playstyle. But if you never score 𝗃𝗏𝗏s, is there a point of actually having the 𝗃𝗏𝗏 playstyle? So these are the certain things you got to take into account when you're choosing number one playstyle. What do you use the most? And that would normally be the one I go with. So I would agree with low driven.
Yeah, I would agree with low driven plus. I do think the regular low driven is pretty good if you're in a situation where you end up with other playstyle pluses and that as a base version, especially if you're using precision. But yeah, I would probably say it's definitely up there. And then finesse plus for me is still really important. And I think that's partly just to give your opponent something to think about, if you like. The fact that you might do a finesse plus finesse is something that can be quite helpful for creating other opportunities, because they maybe cover that finesse angle, and then you can cut inside and things like that. So I think finesse plus pretty important, and then I would personally go for rapid plus and quick step plus as my next two, just because getting that boost and pace away from centre backs is super important, especially if that player isn't lengthy. But if they are lengthy, you can maybe get away with the base versions. But even then, yeah, I think quick step plus is super important on lengthy players. Any disagreements on the two pace play styles being the next most important?
I would say I kind of agree with you, actually. I think finesse shot probably arguably outside the box, and for playstyle pluses at least anyway, I think it's the most effective. But I think also when you turn over play, you get the ball to your striker, sometimes you're outside the box. That's the perfect time to unleash a green time finesse shot in the corner. So I think finesse shot and low driven could interchange, especially if it's more of like a cam. It can be more of a finesse shot. But if it's a striker, I would say also very good. I don't really use it inside the box as much though. I only really use exclusively finesse shots around a penalty arc, or if I'm at a really acute angle. And then the next ones, I slightly different from you. So my third, it will be a kind of a combination. So I either like incisive or tiki-taka. It's mainly for my play style. So with my strikers to tiki-taka, I can play those quick passes inside the box as 1-2s. And I would say the incisive, because sometimes I use my striker and I trigger my cam to run beyond my striker, and then I play that through ball. So that would be my third choice. And then the fourth choice will be quick step.
That makes sense, yeah. I do agree that incisive plus particularly I've found really helpful, especially if you want to feed wide players, things like that. It can help quite a bit. And yeah, tiki-taka is good. I do like the base tiki-taka though. I think it works pretty well. What about you, Hugh? Any other differences?
Yeah, I'd probably agree with what you were saying. The pace one's definitely good to have a passing one as well. I think if the passing stats are good, you can probably get away with just like a base version of some of the passing ones. But it feels like it's really hard to actually run away from anyone if you don't have at least rapid and maybe quick step as well. I feel like anecdotally, maybe it's just an issue with the icon not popping up. I feel like sometimes quick step like doesn't trigger. Like maybe it's
I think it's a bit. Yeah,
maybe it's just like a player was already sprinting before I switched onto them. So when I press sprint, they aren't technically like going faster because they were technically running already, something like that. But over those longer distances, obviously you only get the quick step boost right at the start. So it can vary. And I think sometimes too, like I worry like if you'll be like a little out of control, like if you're in the box and you sprint when you shouldn't, then you go flying into a defender. But that's maybe more of just a user thing, sprinting too much.
Yeah. I would also say that I think First Touch Plus, we talked about it recently, is really good, and Press Proven Plus as well. I think both can be really helpful for retaining the ball when you're playing the ball up to your forward player, which is obviously pretty important in the game generally, especially when you have like centre backs with Bruiser plus and Dissipate plus. In terms of the base play styles, personally, I think 𝘬𝘃𝗧 can be really helpful in certain situations. I think Relentless is pretty key at this point, especially if you want to apply pressure. I like Trickster for the Trickster fake shot as a base play style. And, having those passing play styles is really helpful too, and regular chip shot. Yeah, anything else people want to add on strikers and kind of what you're looking for at this point before we move on?
Quickly, an honourable mention to the jockey playstyle for pressing. I actually really like it. At first, when they released those, and there was that jockey playstyle for the striker, I was thinking maybe it might work, maybe it won't. But I used it, and I actually really liked it. Especially if you don't have, especially the way that I play anyway. I try to press really high up, and I think with that jockey playstyle, I can get away with much more that I wouldn't be able to get away with normally. So just not really more for the striking option, but maybe for the more of the out of possession style of play. I would say just honourable mention for jockey.
That makes sense. Okay. I think that's probably enough on strikers. Just to be a bit more broad about it, we don't have to be super specific. We can move on to cams, because obviously there's a variety of cam roles people might play. Shadow Strike is obviously really popular, but it could be Playmaker, for example. But yeah, what do you have as your top play styles for the cam position? Let's start again with you, Hugh. What would you be going for?
I really like pinged and tiki-taka. I think, just definitely focused on passing. I don't do a ton of long shots, like I said, but like finesse can be good, but I'm really mostly focused on passing. Dribbling's nice, but I'm not one to do a ton of skills or technical, but things like press proven and first touch, both on cams and strikers, I think are really nice just because they're often receiving the ball in more crowded areas. So having that good first touch and you can, turn quickly with the left stick dribbling is really nice. But I'd say, I definitely mostly focus on pinged and tiki-taka. Incisive's good, but I feel like, at least for me over the last few months, I've had a lot of issues with Incisive Plus. Like, that it feels like a player's running open and then Incisive just plays the ball straight to the defender. And I don't know necessarily why, because it feels like sometimes they're pretty open and like they can play an angle where only the player you're passing to could get it, but instead it passes it to an angle where it's right where the center back and striker, for example, are meeting on their runs. And it's like playing these 50-50 balls instead of just playing it where there's tons of space. So I don't know if maybe I'm doing something wrong with that, but I've leaned away a bit more from Incisive just because I feel like a lot of my through balls end up just getting intercepted.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. If you have a player with like pinged plus or even tiki-taka and the player on the other end has first touch of some kind, especially first touch plus, it almost does as good a job as an incisive pass anyway, if that makes sense, because you're getting it to the player really quickly and they can take a really good first touch in the right direction, especially if you get used to holding R1 or RB and flicking the right stick. So you're kind of doing what you might do with an incisive, but more accurately and consistently. So yeah, I do get that. Although that being said, I think I have found Incisive Plus is quite important just because it's so much better than regular Incisive. I've found actually, finding through balls, even though, as you say, it can be tricky. I do bend them quite a lot. If the player has base 𝘬𝘃𝗧 and you do the LT button or L2 button swerve, then I think that can be really good. But yeah, I do like Finesse Plus as well because I do tend to take some long shots. And also, as I said, I think it can help in terms of baiting a particular defensive movement that you can then exploit if you have Finesse Plus. So yeah, I guess I'm using my cam as more of a shadow striker, more maybe play the through ball, but then also come in to join as another forward. So again, low driven plus can be helpful. I think technical is quite good for me because I like to dribble. So yeah, I think there's a lot of personal preference there. But yeah, let's come to you, Neal. What would you be going for at cam?
Similar to you. So I don't really play a traditional cam. I play more of a shadow striker. So I think of them as a second striker. That's the way that I play them. So it's almost identical to the main strikers, except for I mainly prioritize a tiki-taka or a pinged pass or an incisive. If I can get like an incisive tiki-taka and then rapid and quick step, that's a good combination as well that I like. Even though I don't speed boost, I just really like that pace. Especially with the ball. But again, because I play my strikers, especially a cam like a second striker, they're always going to be inside the box. And normally I have a player that can play both a cam and a striker. So if I change to a 4-4-2, I can just move that player seamlessly if they got the role. So that's what I normally go with. But I would say, I lean more towards the passing ones. But maybe before I used to use finesse shots. I still think finesse shot is very good. But I just don't score as much from outside the box anymore. So for my playstyle, I'd much prefer a tiki-taka just so I can get all my front four. I like to have tiki-taka just for that quick passes, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think on that, we've probably wrapped up our playstyle choices for those positions. And yeah, it is good to go through that because I know people are doing Evos. There's obviously Evos which have single playstyle pluses you can add to players. So it's always nice to give people some advice on that. We'll be back with some tactics and additional gameplay advice right after this break. Hello, welcome back after the break. So, Hugh, you mentioned that you hadn't been playing for a bit, and I was quite interested to know from you what your thoughts were on the game having returned after a month out. I know people have praised it quite a bit post-patch or relative to previous cycles, I guess. But yeah, how have you found things after that break?
Yeah, it was good. I mean, obviously it's going to be fairly similar, a month out towards the end of the cycle, not going to be terribly different, but stronger players with more playstyle pluses, things like that. Definitely noticeable that I feel like players are very well-rounded now because of all the different like position change evos. For example, like you might have a winger who got a right back evo, and now they have really good defending stats, but they also have like good shooting stats, or like vice versa. So like I was using that new Gundogan SBC at striker as a false nine, but he has like really high defending, I'm pretty sure. So like kind of like what Neal was saying, like having players in attack who can also defend and like intercept the ball and jockey and stuff like that. I think that's a bit of a change from like the team of the season era where players were really good, but they were kind of more specialized into certain roles. But yeah, overall, I think the newer patch is definitely a good thing, step in the right direction. Towards this time of season kind of gets like, silly season where players are a little ridiculous, but I'm still able to have a good time, trying some new tactics and things like that.
Yeah. And then Neal, what do you make of this game in its end game form? Do you think it's a good game to play with really juiced players and playstyles and things like that? Is it better than it has been this year, do you think?
I think compared to last year, it's better. I think that's the way that I kind of, with the new foot IQ and everything. I think maybe one thing I would say is sometimes I feel like nowadays the game, it's kind of like you need the play styles, if that makes sense. So the way I use this time of the year is, okay, I wanted a player with, for example, quick step, rapid and tiki-taka. I could never do it anywhere throughout the year, but I can do it now. So that's the way I look at the game. But I think if you're comparing this to last year's iteration, I think it's a big difference. But it's a bit of a debatable one. I'll be honest, I don't really, at this time of the month especially, I don't really play that much. I play a little bit, but then maybe like in a 2 months time from now is normally when the beta comes out for the next year, historically speaking, always around August. So it's kind of like just a bit of a limbo state, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And then we'll find out more about gameplay for the new game, I guess, and you'll be interested to see what comes when we get that announcement. And it's going to be fascinating to see because there's already been some whispers from gameplay producers about how the game is quite different to 25, but this was in a Spanish interview, so I'm a little unclear as to whether they were saying that it was different to what we got at the start of 25 or different to what we got post-patch, because obviously the game is quite different to pre-patch. As we've talked about many times, that January patch made quite a big difference. Anyway, let's move back into FC25 and talk about what people might want to try. Your tactic, Hugh, you were going to mention, I think people might be interested to try because you're saying it is quite kind of bold and aggressive and maybe a good one for this point in the cycle.
Yeah, so I just got back from a week in Jamaica and I was reading a book about Pep Guardiola and some of his tactics at City, which, to people in the Discord will be no surprise, but he was, just talking about some of the different like eras and like tactical variations and got me wanting to play the game a bit. So when I came back, I was looking to do a setup with the two center backs and then the two false backs inverted next to the CDM, allowing the two center mids in a 4-3-3-2, the one with two center mids and one CDM to kind of roam and go forward, and then two wide wingers and a false nine. I've done kind of similar things, back in previous years when we had the actual false nine tactic, which was always my go-to. I feel like whenever I wasn't enjoying the game, if I switched to that, I would start enjoying it more just because of like the creative runs and things like that. So that was really what I was going for. So just a quick run through of the tactic. I have a sweeper keeper at the back, 2 center defenders on, just defender. I was using ball playing defender for a while, but I felt like because the fullbacks are both going forward a bit, it just made things like a little too loose at the back, especially in transition. So I switched to just defender, and I don't feel like it really affected me that much in possession anyway. So then 2 false backs on defend sitting next to the CDM, which is a DLP on defend. The center mids are both playmaker on attack, 2 wingers on attack, and then a false 9 at striker. And what I really liked about this was that because the false backs moved into like the center mid zones, it pushed them forward. And with the false 9, it like really pushed them forward, and the wingers staying wide to give them that space. So there'd be a lot of interchanging. Like sometimes the right center mid would kind of be in the striker zone, and the false 9 would be closer to the right center mid area. Also because of the way the wingers set up so wide, they were basically always free on the counter, because even if someone's fullbacks didn't go forward, they kind of naturally are a bit more narrow than like the full touchline winger. So when you got it into the center mid, that through ball down the line was basically on every single time. So if you're comfortable with getting the ball on the wing, like if you like doing skills, things like that, it's really good because you get a lot of like 1v1 opportunities.
That does sound really good. So you did find that the centre mids were aggressive enough at kind of getting forward into the box, because I feel like that's been one of the issues whenever I've tried like a 4-3-3 shape, that they maybe don't sort of try and get into that space enough, and it can leave you a bit short on attacking numbers.
Yeah, definitely. I noticed really both of them got forward a lot. I played 25 games between rivals and champs, and my left center mid, Bernardo Silva, had 27 goals, 21 assists. KDB at right center mid had 30 goals, 14 assists. And the false 9 had 27 goals, 24 assists. So all pretty similar. You can see it like with the goal numbers, especially that like they were basically all 3 of them were like the main goal scorers rather than the wingers being like inside forwards.
That's really interesting. And so did you mention whether you had it on balanced or counter, or what were the testing?
I was using short passing actually, just because I wanted to make sure the players were like, because it can be so open on the counter, you want to make sure you have passing options, because if you're trying to play like long aggressive passes at the wrong time, then you turn it over and get countered really easily.
And what depth did you have it on?
I set it to high, but I think I had it up on 90. I couldn't quite remember because they did that patch a few months back. Was it like over 90 depth? Was like kind of, or was it aggressive at 95?
Yeah, it was 95, yeah.
Okay, yeah, I put it at 90 because I thought that was like aggressive but safe. So that's what I went for.
Nice, yeah. And actually, we'll put the tactic code, as we always do, in the description of the podcast, and I guess people can probably also check it out once Hugh has put it in the tactics bank in the supporter Discord. A reminder, if you're a gold or icon supporter, you have access to the Discord. Do join that. There's a explainer of how to join within the Patreon episodes of the podcast in the description there. You'll see a little link to go and set it up if you haven't done so already, but it's fairly self-explanatory. Cool. Well, an interesting tactic. Let's move on to Neal about tactics. Is there anything particularly you've kind of spotted recently? Any kind of tactics you've been preferring or maybe avoiding? I know 3 and 5 at the back. I've seen people try it recently and just struggle. So I guess maybe not that.
Interesting. So I made some tactics early on in the year. Normally I create like quite a few, and then I choose the ones that I'm going to release. So there's been a few that I've been working on. So my favorite right now is like a 3-5-2 made out of the 4-2-2. That's my favorite tactic right now because you're still defending a 2 CDM and a back 4. So I would say that's probably the most fun tactic. It's very one-sided. So the way it works is one of the cams is a half winger. So if you imagine a 4-2-2 in attack, imagine your left attacking cam moves out to the left mid position as a half winger, and then your right attacking cam ends up becoming a shadow striker, so just behind the 2 strikers. So it's attack heavy down one side. So let's say you attack predominantly down the left-hand side. That's the way that I'll go. And if you want to spice things up, you can make the right back an attacking wing back, and then you basically have a 3-5-2 in possession. And out of possession, you have a 4-2-2. That's one that I made like 2 months ago, and then I've just basically been using that. Is another tactic I'm releasing probably next week is trying to make a 4-1-2-1-2 with the 4-2-2 again. But this way it's more viable. The issue with the 4-1-2-1-2 narrow anyway is that when you defend, you're pretty much stuck in this narrow shape. Whereas historically, in older FCs or older FIFA, should I say rather, you could play and defend in the 4-4-2. So I've been working on having a system where you can defend in the 4-2-2, but also attack in the 4-1-2 on the second variation. Still fine tuning it, but it's not going to be exactly like for like, but it'll be like a similar format as well. So there's a lot of tactics that maybe I just haven't released, if that makes sense, that maybe weren't considered quote unquote meta for every single person as a good baseline, but ones that I'm probably going to be releasing very, very soon.
Yeah, it's interesting, Neal, you talking about the, I guess, 3 at the back you've created using YcwK. Has that been something that's a bit frustrating for you? You're someone who likes to try different tactics, that 3 and 5 at the back just hasn't really been a thing this cycle. And would you like to see that change for 26?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a tough one because you want to balance what's good in real life and what's good in the game. You know, I think people have always enjoyed playing 3 in the back in the game. If you said in real life, does anyone actually play 3 at the back? Probably not. I mean, you'd say like even a team like Inter with really attacking wingbacks in defense, when the wingbacks come back, it is a line of 5. So really they are playing 5 at the back. But, you know, people kind of have such a stigma and aversion to 5 at the back in Ultimate Team. And I do understand it because, you know, in the past years, like 5-4-1 were incredibly boring to play against. But it feels like there could be some sort of happy medium where you can kind of, you know, maybe not make it so strong defensively, but then lots of fun going forward with like the way that wingbacks overlap and things like that. Obviously, there's other ways to do it, you know, like a center half drops in and stuff like that. But I think that's definitely one of the main ones. I think another one I think about in real life that's hard to replicate is the out of possession structures. Like if you think oftentimes like City or Liverpool, like they'll have like someone like Szoboszlai or Kevin De Bruyne last year, where they're playing as an attacking midfielder, but out of possession, they're basically a striker. It's like Haaland and KDB up front, or like Gakpo or Szoboszlai up front in like a 4-2-4 defensively or something like that. But in this, like, unless they have the ability to play striker, you can't really have them defending like that. Like that, if they're playing cam, they will defend in the cam area. So it'd be kind of cool to see some more variation out of possession. Obviously, you don't want people to go too crazy like we used to have, where, you know, you can attack in any formation and defend in basically any formation, or everyone defends a 4-4-2. But, you know, some sort of variation there I think could be cool, because when everyone plays, for example, 4-2-1-3, then they also defend exactly in that 4-2-1-3. Then maybe if you could alter in possession out of possession a little bit more, you might see less people kind of flock to the most defensively secure formations because they can get there from other methods.
Well, that's an interesting thing as well, because there's a bit of a, what do you call it, conflict, where actually out of possession is essentially the starting formation, right? In a way, at the moment. But the positions that players are given, as in, you know, Szoboszlai, for example, is his kind of attacking position, really, not his out of possession position, right? So in a weird way, it would make more sense for him to be a striker, because that's, or maybe like a cam almost, because that is his out of possession position, and that's what the kind of base formation is based on. But that isn't really how player positioning is assigned. So yeah, I think you're right that there's like a weird situation right now where you can't quite do what players would do in the real game because of that. I think on that kind of slightly kind of confusing point, but hopefully still makes sense, we could take a break, and we'll be back to talk about some specific gameplay tips in just a second. Hello, and in this break, a quick reminder that the pod is made possible by supporters. The pod didn't used to be weekly. Yes, Foot Weekly wasn't actually weekly for a time. And then someone suggested setting up the Patreon. And since then, the pod has been weekly. And in fact, it's been twice weekly, because there is that supporter episode every single week. So if you'd like to catch that episode and keep the podcast going, it's just £3 a month to do so. and you get loads in return. And there are perks higher than that, including access to the Discord too. So if you're interested and would like to support the podcast, then head over and search support for weekly. Go to Patreon and it's very easy to sign up. If you are a supporter keeping the podcast going, then a huge thank you for doing so. And if you do consider supporting, a huge thank you too. Right, let's jump back into the pod. Hello, welcome back after the break. Let's start with this question from Alex. He says, I'm interested to understand more of the difference between negatively rushing gameplay, missing opportunities by running too much, etc., and trying to implement an effective, fast tempo, tiki-taka style. Neal once spoke about how when losing, a player will naturally start rushing their gameplay, trying to get back in the game. I suffer from this for sure. Is there anything a player can do, formations, playstyles, depth changes, anxiety management, to try and control that natural inclination to rush into a style that can actually get you back into a game? So let's start with the sort of, tactical changes he's talking about. Would you ever recommend, Neal, people just sort of change tactic when they're trying to not rush and just kind of, get into the game by slowing things down and kind of getting control, I suppose?
Bit of an interesting one. I've tried to give some people, like, let's say, so when you have a one striker, let's say you use a 4-5-1, so the 4-5-1 flat with left mids, right mids, 3 center mids. It's a very high level tactic to play, I would say, for someone who maybe isn't really the best at the game if you're up against the same level opponent. The reason why is it requires you to be very diligent because you have to build up slowly. You can't really go for those inside forwards or those 2 striker passes that you may normally ping the ball to. But then some people still rush their gameplay regardless. They still play quick. I'd probably say get rid of counter. I think counter really helps in the attack. But I think also, psychologically speaking, you end up playing faster, people making more runs in behind. I have a rule. If you are going to be a bit more faster in your play, build up slowly. And then kind of in a final third, you can play a bit quicker. That doesn't mean just to spam, for example, a speed boost or just spam any pass. But I would say that way you can separate the two, because where the biggest issue is, most goals are conceded when you're building up the play and you're losing the ball, both in real life and inside the game. So if you can mitigate that initial aspect, and maybe let's say once you enter maybe just in the beginning of the final third, maybe even just the second half when you're clearing possession, then maybe you can speed up the tempo. But I would definitely recommend maybe a bit more of those defensive, I would say, play styles. Use a balance on your attacking style, but be careful. You don't want to make it too defensive and obviously lose your attack as well. So it's kind of like a balancing act of finding out what really works for you. But sometimes just about pausing the game. Just literally, like, if you concede a goal, just pause the game, take a deep breath, drink the water, and let the pause go out completely. Try to let all your emotion go out. Don't let any of your emotions alter this. So just because when you start conceding a goal, especially in a game, maybe you got a bit unlucky, that's when the dominoes start falling down.
I think that's a really good point. I think, I often, when I'm playing at my best, will, after conceding a goal, no matter, what the context is, unless I'm like, at the very, very end of a game, but even then to an extent, I'll make sure that I get, maybe 5-6 completed passes between players that are relatively easy to pass to, not trying to kind of force it at all, just to show that, to my opponent, I'm not in my head about this, if you like. I've not lost it because I've maybe gone a goal down or they've tied the game, or even if you're like 3 goals up and they've scored the first goal, because it's really important to kind of demonstrate to the opponent that you still have the upper hand if you currently do. And actually, often it can be then them that gets a bit frustrated and you find it easier to score that next goal. And yeah, I definitely agree that kind of taking the time to reassert dominance is often a very, very good idea. And yeah, even when you're ahead, but also when you're losing as well, don't feel rushed. And I think that's the main thing. Hugh, anything to add? I guess there are a few other things we could talk about on this, but yeah, anything you wanted to mention in terms of tempo?
Yeah, I would just say it's something we also talk about a lot when we play pro clubs. Some of us in the Discord play clubs that, like, playing faster doesn't have to mean more direct or like getting the ball up the field faster. It just means passing quicker. Don't hold the ball for too long, because as soon as a player receives the ball, the defender's going, like the whole defense is going to shift to adapt to where they are. So if you ping it out to the winger and you just kind of stand there or like stand in place and do some skill moves, the whole defense is shifting across and like blocking off passing angles, like someone's starting to press you. Like obviously if you want to invite the pressure and go past, like that's one thing. But if you're just kind of jogging around with the ball, then they're starting to shift over to you. So when the player gets the ball, either go and do something with it or find someone else to pass to. Because the longer you wait, that's kind of letting the defense adapt to what you're doing. So if you don't have a chance to dribble against someone, like you don't have a good dribbler or you're not very good at skilling or things like that, then maybe take a couple touches, then look to play to the next player, lay it off, things like that. And then I'd also just add that try not to sprint too much unless you're in behind, just because if there's defenders between you and the goal, the more you sprint, the sooner they will be near you, and then you have to make a decision. So if you kind of go towards goal but jogging speed, they'll start closing you down. Then you can play it around them or go past them. But if you just sprint straight at a defender, now you're closing down your own space. If, like you worked hard to create this space, get it to an open player, and now you're taking away your own space. So now you have to, unless you're ready to if you're like about to take a shot or something like that, now you're taking away your own time. Whereas if they have to come out to you as you're going towards them, but you're under control, now you kind of have more options. Whereas don't just sprint straight at them and like hope for the best.
I was just to say, one of my favorite things to do against opponents who play the 4-2-1-3, which is obviously really quite common, is to not sprint but advance with your fullback into the sort of, I don't know, kind of slightly more central part of the pitch than maybe your fullback would typically go to. And they are just a regular fullback in terms of their role, not inverted, but you advance into that area. And often you'll just see them wanting to get to you with their CDM, potentially, if they're not particularly clever about the way they put pressure on. Sometimes they'll do it with the cam, which is smarter, but they'll often do it with the CDM. And you can kind of lure their CDM out into the wide positions. And then, maybe play it to your winger, play it inside them, and play it to your attacking player who's taken up space behind the CDM. And that kind of thing requires you to be kind of patient in your build-up. You're not, if you do rush, you're not going to be able to create that opportunity. And so much of the game, especially against these quite densely packed tactics that some people use, is about sort of luring players out of space so you can then exploit it. And you just can't do that, as you say. If you're going to just sprint towards players, then they can just stand there in the position they're kind of already in. Your opponent's going to select them in the position they're already in, and you're not going to give them that time to mess up, basically, which people often do. So I think that's a really important point.
Just add something else with that point. Something I completely forgot to measure, but that's one of the best key tips. So when I'm coaching someone, sometimes what I normally do is I ban them. So certain people I say, look, I'm banning you from running. So what that means is for the entire game, you don't run. Now that means, of course, when you're defending, you run back. I'm not saying defensively, but I mean in possession, the only time you'd run is, let's say there's a through ball down the wing, then you would, of course, run onto that. But apart from that, I would ban them. And what this basically does is it forces them to, because the issue is we're getting pressured, is that you don't have that much time on a ball. And as was said previously, when you're running, you're taking longer strides. So you try to make a pass midway through your stride, the pass doesn't actually happen the action until you touch the ball again. So I would say just ban yourself from running. Just whenever you get the ball in possession, just ban yourself completely from running. And then you'll find out that in the attack, it's all about being patient. But maybe, as was said earlier, you want to be quick in your execution. So let's say you see your striker available. If you make a normal pass, maybe that'll be intercepted. But if you made, for example, a ping pass, so that will, as what I mean by playing fast, if that makes sense. It's not necessarily just running from A to Z. It's like making decisions quicker. Okay, you see a chance. My opponent's made a mistake. Now it's my time to capitalize. So I would say speed of your execution as opposed to holding the run button, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. I guess we've probably done enough on tempo, but it's interesting you were talking about your tactic earlier, Hugh. That sounds like the kind of formation that actually, if people were interested in thinking more about tempo and controlling the game, that it might be quite good to try out, actually.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely one that you get the most from it if you play a lot of passes and keep possession. Obviously, we're not just passing it around the back, but if it's one where you just try to like spam counters and things like that, it's you're going to get countered, yourself. I think a quote from that book was like, the faster the ball goes up the field, the faster it comes back. If you're just lumping through balls and long balls and like pinging passes straight to the striker from defense or things like that, you're probably going to get intercepted and turn it over. And that's where you're going to have issues. So something I really liked was I was using that company in goal, which, I'm not a big fan of the shapeshifters concept, but, City legend, and he's got pinged pass, which is really what I wanted. He can't save a shot to save his life, but he can ping that pass between the center backs straight into the CDM. From there, then you have the two fullbacks inverted and the two center mids. So if you're facing a 4-2-1-3, if their cam is against the CDM, now they have two CDMs to cover four other midfielders. So if you ping it into him and lay it off, now you have like a ton of passing options. It's so easy to play through the press. But if all I wanted to do was just lump it up, I have like fast but not tall wingers. I have a false nine who's not going to win headers. You got to play to the strengths of your team.
Yeah. Really good point. Nice. Well, I think, we have now covered the tempo question enough, but any follow-up questions on that, do send them in. At the end here, I guess, Neal, it might be interesting to ask you, what things would you recommend people start sort of trying out in their gameplay or focusing on in their gameplay that might help for 26? I guess I'm thinking about things that, carry across between cycles.
I would say now is an interesting time to be experimental. So I think a lot of the time, especially even team of the season, you're always trying hard because you're playing for the highest rank. So it might not be the best time to try precision shooting. What I'd probably recommend is at this time of the year, precision shooting is something that I would recommend. I think it's kind of I have a different stance on it. I think it can only work well if you're already very calm inside the box, which a lot of people, I would say, below the elite division are not. There are a few people that are maybe calm in their gameplay, but I think the average person, take the average person here, I would say when they're inside the box, they panic, they either shoot too early or they kind of press a button combination they don't want to. So it doesn't really work out. But now is the best time because there's nothing really to play for. So if you're playing squad battles, doing your evolutions, or maybe you're playing rivals and you're not in your highest division, maybe being relegated back at the end of last season, this is the perfect time to try things out like precision shooting. I would say definitely give that a go. Advanced defending, you can also try. I mean, I think it has its benefits, but I think the benefit of precision shooting is much higher than advanced defending, if you ask me. I think tactical is completely fine. But those are a few things that I would mechanically use. In terms of just gameplay, it's also maybe just analyzing your gameplay. Just have a look at your gameplay. Just make sure you play the basic way because a lot of these cards that have these play styles, you're not going to have them when the next game comes out. So you may be used to speed boosting with rapid and quick step now. But when the next game comes out, who knows? Maybe it might not even be in the game. They might nerf it. Who knows? But the most important thing is you won't have those play styles available. So sometimes, normally at the end of the cycle, what I do is I kind of come back to reality per se, play like a few kickoff games and just see how the game is with a normal team as opposed to ultimate team as well. Something just to mention as well.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned advanced defending there. So for those who don't know, the way that advanced defending works is that rather than the game choosing for you whether you seal out or tackle the player, instead you decide. And if you want to do a seal out, you press X on PlayStation or A on Xbox. If you want to do a tackle, you press B on Xbox or circle on PlayStation. And I didn't feel it was especially useful this cycle, advanced defending, because it probably does give you a bit of an advantage, but I think with the fact that the tackle recovery speed previously was pretty good, if you accidentally did a tackle, it didn't matter that much and you could just continue and then seal them out. But now, obviously, there's been this patch, which means that actually if you make a tackle instead of a seal out, it's more punishing. And so if that continues into next cycle, I think probably advanced defending is going to give you an advantage because it's going to be more important to not accidentally tackle when you're meant to seal out. So if you use advanced defending, you can do the X or A for seal out and B or circle for tackle, and you have control over it. So maybe that is something that, if you've done precision shooting already, that you could try that. But what about you, Hugh? Have you got any kind of pointers that people might want to give a try?
Yeah, I think I've just always had advanced defending on. I just never really bothered to turn it off. So ever since it was brought out, was it like last year or the year before, or something like that. I think I've just always left it on. I like it. I think sometimes if you're kind of shoulder to shoulder but slightly behind someone, if you kind of tap A now and then, like the seal out button, it kind of does a bit of a jersey grab. I feel like it kind of slows them down slightly. I don't know if that's just the way the animation looks, but it feels like it kind of like starts to do this seal out where you kind of nudge them and it kind of throws off their pace a little bit, I think. I haven't like tested it or like seen any like deep dives on it, but that's part of why I like it. Like Neal said earlier, I do a lot of slide tackles as well, which is not really related to tactical or advanced defending, but I feel like if I'm in a good position where I know I can win the ball, I feel like really confident if I slide that I'm going to win it. Whereas at least pre-patch, it was a little more of a lottery of whether the tackle would actually get you the ball. Maybe it's not quite as useful now or not as necessary, I'll say. But I do slide a lot, especially for like blocking shots, stuff like that. So sometimes you'll give away fouls or penalties, but I think sometimes it's worth the risk.
Just to add to that, something I wanted to say is with precision shooting, I think you can try it and it's not that much of a risk. You might miss that opportunity, but I think if you're calm, it's fine. I think with advanced defending, if you make a mistake, it's going to put you in real danger and you end up conceding more goals. If you're asking me, I would probably say just bear in mind it's a very high level thing. I think once you know how to defend properly, then you can use advanced defending, and then I think it would really help you go up your levels. Maybe you could try out a little bit just to see how it works. But also just do bear that in mind.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Like, it is a tricky thing to get used to. And the game is okay at making that decision for you. Whereas like precision shooting, you're literally just getting better shooting. so like it is a bit different. And precision shooting is a lot of fun. I'd really recommend people try that out. And yeah, this is a good time to do it, as we've been saying. So yeah, I think we are on that ready to wrap up. I guess Hugh, as we have you on and you've been doing a lot of your sort of Guardiola Tactico stuff in the Discord for pro clubs, it's probably worth mentioning that, you know, if people want to give pro clubs a try, I know you guys are taking it fairly seriously at times, but there's the opportunity to kind of jump in and give that a go over the summer if people want to try a 11 versus, well, not always 11 versus 11, but pretty much 11 versus 11 experience where you control one player. It's an interesting way to play the game. Yeah,
certainly. I think it's always valuable to kind of play the game in different ways because that you kind of realize things that you wouldn't have tried otherwise. Kind of like what Neal was saying with also, like trying precision shooting, trying like timed finishing, things like that like, especially this part of the cycle where like, if you're just playing the same way you've always played all cycle, you might just be like reinforcing certain habits that like sometimes it's good to like realize how other people play the game, what you might be missing out on, stuff like that. So can definitely be useful, moving forward, especially because next cycle, who knows what meta things from this cycle will work next cycle, or, different tricks that, skills that you've never bothered to learn. You see someone else do them and suddenly you realize, wow, this actually is something I should work on mastering.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Right, we should, on that, I think, wrap up the podcast. So yeah, Neal, it's been great to have you back on. Loads of great advice, of course. And if people want more content from you, they can check out your YouTube channel, right? Just search Neal, Neal Guides to find Neal on YouTube. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, as usual. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's been good to have you, and great to have you as well, Hugh, after a little while. Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Looking forward to discussing, hopefully some news for the new game coming out soon. Not too long now, you would think. Looking forward to that. And obviously, if you're in the Discord, we'll be chatting about the game in there. And if you're not in the Discord, definitely join it. If you're a Patreon member, it's always a good time. Even if the game's not as exciting, we were talking real world football, transfers, all sorts of stuff. So it's always fun.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, if you are a Gold or Icon supporter, just check the description of the supporter episodes and there's a link explaining how to join. But it's pretty easy to sign up. So yeah, thank you very much to our guests here, and thank you very much to all you listeners tuning in. A reminder, if you're catching this on YouTube, drop a like, leave a comment, and do subscribe too. And you can subscribe via all the various podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. And if you'd like an extra podcast every week, that should be this week, the content podcast, but this is the summer, so scheduling can be a bit different. Then do become a supporter. Just search Support Foot Weekly. And you can also follow the link in the description of this podcast. To all you supporters out there supporting the pod and keeping it going, a huge, huge thank you for doing so. And a big thank you to those Icon patrons: Dave B, Darren W, Hugh J, Rob W, Brent P, Ralph, Josh R, Brian, Michael B, Adam R, 𝘵𝘀𝘀𝘀, Make B, Michael H, Andrew P, Arian B, Rob S, Michael K, Neal P, Jake S, Tom B, Alex M, Alan G, Lee A, Chris G, Mark M, Dom P, Rob P, Roger D, Dan W, Waterman, Also Ran, and Juicy. Plus a special thanks to Luke M, Dave B, Hugh J, Tom M, Darren W, and Pato Foot for advice and production assistance. Before I leave you, just one more thing to add though. Ultimate Team is a bit like life really. It has its many ups and downs. If you're having a few more downs than ups in real life in these more difficult times, then please don't feel that you're alone or need to struggle on without taking action. If you go to thecalmzone.net, there's loads of resources, advice, support, or even just a friendly chat for anyone who needs it. If it sounds like it could help you, then head over to thecalmzone.net. And for now, have a good one, and I'll catch you on the next podcast.